What's going on, guys? Taylor here. I'm back. This is BeacomOfLight. Hello. How are ya? Enthusiasm. Yay. Crazy times we live in, huh? There's a little bug going around in this world. Did you hear about that? Did you get it? Did you have the sniffles for a bit? I have not gotten it yet, or so I don't think. But it's an interesting pandemic because this flu is so crazy. This Chinese flu is so crazy that you have to get a test to know if you've had it, essentially. Even though some people it's affected pretty badly. A couple people died. So I'm pretty excited today because I'm doing an interview with this guy who I think I have a lot in common with, and he seems pretty cool. He seems very smart. I think that's the only thing we don't have in common. He's very smart, and I am dumb. But he goes by the name EricsElectrons on Instagram and Twitter, and he is I believe, PhD in physics. He's a student, or is aspiring to get a PhD in physics. He's a student. He's a self-proclaimed meme king, and I think I found him in the comments section on one of EricsElectrons' posts, who I've been finding very delightful and fascinating. If you haven't checked her out yet, definitely check her out. EricsElectrons, she's a British fashion designer who happens to be black and is also extremely wise beyond her years and very well spoken and fun to listen to as well, and she has interviews all over YouTube. But EricsElectrons is quite fascinating to me because a lot of what he posts about are his viewpoints on identity politics and Black Lives Matter and different social issues going on primarily in the United States from the perspective of a scientist and a physics student and someone who seems to be very in tune with the Socratic method and the scientific method and just not critical race theory. I'm going to ask him about that, but critical thinking and just deduction, asking why, pressing, looking for evidence, evidence-based claims, looking for answers and facts over feelings, rationale and reason and logic over emotions, and so I'm pretty excited about him, and I want you guys to give a warm welcome for EricsElectrons. How's it going?
It's going pretty good.
EricsElectrons. Do you have a last name, or do you prefer to keep that secret?
Right now,
or is it Electrons?
I wish it was. But yeah. Right now I'm gonna keep it secret. But yeah, I do have a last name.
Makes sense, man. Yeah, you don't want to get doxxed because if nowadays if you say anything against the progressive woke mob, anything that criticizes it, like something like all people should be treated equal regardless of their skin color. If you say that, they'll come after you.
Yeah, and I've already almost got doxxed. So yeah, that's part of the reason. Yeah.
For what? I mean, it's just crazy. Anyway, let's first talk about you and who you are, because I added you on Instagram or followed you on Instagram because you not only are interested in physics and you're clearly a smart guy, but you've said some really interesting things. And well, you've quoted a lot of people that I also follow. EricsElectrons. I mean, we could go down the list, but yeah, I thought you were super interesting and figured I should add you and chat with you, say what's up. Or I don't know, how old are you?
I'm 30.
Yeah, so we're the same age. Yeah, I figured we're seeming like we have a lot in common, so I figured I'd say what's up. But so you're a physicist. That's what you're working on a degree in physics. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
How did you get into that?
Oh man, I just had like this epiphany one day. Like I lost love of school because like I had a horrible high school experience. Like the high school that I went to was one of the worst in Northern California. So
You're
after
from
that,
Oakland, right? You
yeah,
told me
yeah,
you're from
from
Oakland.
Oakland,
Yeah.
and then I moved to Pittsburgh, California shortly after that, and I spent most of my years in Pittsburgh, California, which is only 30 minutes from Oakland. But yeah, I, had a horrible high school experience. Honestly, barely passed high school. Um, Went into the workforce right after, and I was traveling around doing all types of jobs. And then I don't know, one night I got tired of doing that, and I woke up to this documentary about this physicist trying to create a time travel machine so he could warn his father about his heart attack that he would have because his father died of a heart attack when he was a teenager, and it sent
Whoa.
him into depression. And this is a real story, by the way. And he was he was really troubled by that, and he came across a book about Einstein's relativity and how it allows for time travel. So because of that, he went into college in the 70s or 80s, I think the 70s, and he became a physicist later on, and he's working on work that would lay the foundations for, time travel if that were to happen in the future and such. So that like blew my mind because I always loved time travel movies. I always had science books and loved learning about physics. So because of that, I just decided one day like this is what I want to do. And I would do math all the time for fun, just to learn it and do it. It was just fun as a pastime for me. So it was just a natural thing to get into for me.
Dude, that's awesome, man. Yeah, I've definitely pretended that I'm into physics before. I think I've done some like basic. I've read Michio Kaku. Maybe you're
Hmm.
familiar with him. He was on.
Yeah, yeah.
I did some TV shows. I have physics books that make me look cool because they sit on my bookshelf. But I barely even read any of them. It's a lot to process, and it requires, I think, serious intellectual, well, just mental discipline and diligence to like really focus and try and learn that stuff. Maybe you're a savant, maybe it comes naturally to you. But I was before we started recording, I was asking you about the concept of quarks, and I think you explained it probably in the most simple way you could to me because I'm a layman and I still didn't understand it. And I was just like, yeah, because of mass, and when you observe it, and when the more you about the mass you know about the quark, the less it's. I was like, all right, man. Well, let's talk about what was something I'm good at. Maybe let's talk about beer or something like that. And I don't know the physics of yeast.
Yeah,
But
there was
but
actually a class on that before. I
really,
forgot where it was, or maybe it was like some lecture that happened at my school, but they did like some physics of beer at one time. I thought that was
wow.
interesting. Yeah.
Well, sign me up, man. I'll take that class. Do you get to drink the beer during it? You get to.
Yeah, I think so. From what I remember, yeah.
Yes, the yeah, yeah, energy equals mass squared. Oh, it's IPA. Oh, yeah, yeah, exactly. That's
Uh,
cool, man. Yeah, I definitely find physics fascinating. I just wish that I don't know. I wish that I could understand it better. But so okay, so you're currently a student in Atlanta, Georgia. Is that right?
that's correct.
Yeah. And what's been the process like learning physics and at the school in Georgia? How's that been going?
It's really good because I'm right by Georgia Tech, which is one of the biggest schools for physics in the world. So I usually go to a lot of their lectures, and I know a lot of people there. That's the school I'm more likely going to transfer to later on. But it's been a good process. I mean, it's a lot of math to learn. It's a lot of sitting there and focusing on one problem and getting things wrong all the time, and
Yeah.
constantly humbling yourself. So that's the process, but the reward that you get when you actually get it right, it's worth it. So
Sure.
Atlanta allows for all that, and then every year they have a science festival and they do stuff for kids, and I try to volunteer so I could learn how to teach people a lot better than I do currently. So I've been doing that for like about 4 to 5 years now.
Dude, that's awesome, man. Yeah, that's so when you talk about analyzing something, making mistakes, and pushing forward and remaining diligent to come to a conclusion. I think that kind of that's a good segue into some of the tweets and Instagram posts that you've made that made me interested in talking to you. The scientific method and critical thinking and the Socratic method of evidence-based claims. And you definitely mentioned that quite a bit in some of your tweets and Instagram posts, and I'll put that up in the edited version of this. But maybe we can transition from talking about your interest in physics and your schooling to sort of what got you into commenting on kind of the social environment and what's happening in primarily in this country, let alone the world, although we know America influences the rest of the world quite a bit.
Yeah, so I would say it began maybe around 2010 or so. Like I would keep a close eye on different movements, and at the time, I was really into the whole intellectual movement behind atheism. I'm not an atheist per se, but at the same time, I'm still interested in those type of movements. And at the time, it was Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, and all of them. They were
Dan
tour
Dennett,
and they would,
you gotta round out the
Dan
four
Dennett,
horsemen.
yeah, the Four Horsemen. Yeah, that's right. And yeah, so they would talk about like, different things regarding like just reason and critical thinking, but then also um, like the problem with religion in certain places and all this other stuff, and the flack they used to get from people from usually the political left. It was very telling, and the fact that there was so much pushback that they would get just for simply like fighting back against stuff like how, for instance, some people wanted to stop stem cell research because they thought that it was like playing God, and they would comment on that. And then people from the left were like, well, you shouldn't go into countries doing research on this, even though it can help people. And then it's like, well, that's science, and this is that, and both should kind of stay out of one another's way in terms of like how they operate. So that was weird to me. And then in 2012, there was this thing called Elevator Gate that happened, and Elevator Gate was basically um, a feminist in the atheist community. She had an incident where she was talking with a lot of people at a bar. She goes back to her hotel, but some guy gets on the elevator with her, and he makes a pass at her, trying to get her to come to his room. And she felt like that was an uncomfortable exchange because she said she clearly told him like she didn't want to do any of that. And then she wrote a blog about it and said like this is a big problem in conferences, and there should be like some codes and things of that nature changed. And I didn't agree with a lot of what she said, like in terms of like it being a big issue, because I've been to these atheist conferences. I was around that whole thing, and that wasn't a big issue even when I asked other women that. And for some reason her and many others like did this vicious attack on Richard Dawkins about the things that he was saying against it, because he wrote response to whatever she wrote, basically saying stop complaining or something like that. And of course it didn't go over too well. But then after that, soon after that, like I would say weeks, they started implementing intersectionality feminism into like the atheist movement. So it was like the identity politics stuff into the atheist movement, and they called it Atheism Plus, and they were doing this whole thing. And then that's when I saw a breakaway of the atheist movement, and I saw them attack Thunderfoot for simply like disagreeing or saying certain things, and they banned him for Free Thoughts blog. They doxed him. They made fun of his dying father, who ended up dying from cancer, I think. They did a whole bunch of vicious stuff, and I was like, well, how can you be for social justice and say these things, and yet you're so vicious towards someone like Thunderfoot? And he's like one of the nicest people in the world. I've talked to him on different occasions, and I just didn't get that. And then I would say the final straw was probably the Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown incident. And those incidences, like, like I know that police brutality is a thing, but um, I was always skeptical about the claims that people made around there. And then when the investigation happened, I noticed certain things, and the founders weren't able to say, "Hey, we were wrong about this." So then I stopped supporting BLM, and that's when I started being more outspoken than I usually was, and then that's when I actually put my face on it, because before then I was not, I wouldn't say anonymous, like it linked to my Instagram and where my personal pictures were, but I didn't have like the name I had now, and I didn't have a picture on there. So I would say that's where it mainly started, was around that time.
Yeah, that's interesting. It seems like a lot of people, I would say the vast majority of people who have made any posts on social media about Black Lives Matter, have only done so since George Floyd, so this year.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so it's interesting to know that you've been following that since, Michael Brown, which was what, 2015 or 2014 or
About,
something. I mean, that was,
yeah, something like that. Yeah.
yeah, it was during Obama's presidency, and I remember he sent Eric Holder there and the FBI to do an investigation, and then the whole narrative at the time was hands up, don't shoot. That he was,
Hmm.
not being aggressive, and he was completely innocent, and that he was holding his hands up, and that was. And I don't want to say proven to be false, because if you and I both share the same sort of, you know, uh, um, critical thinking interest, that neither of us were actually there, so we can't say for
Hmm.
sure. But there were what, 30 people on the jury or something, or that testified, or eyewitnesses or whatever it was, that said that that was not true, and that he was, uh, beating the cop in the car. And
Yeah.
anyway,
DNA evidence showed that, his DNA was on, I think, in the cop's car and on the gun. So it looked like he was reaching for the cop's gun while he was beating him up. So it was just all bad in many ways. So
for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you've been following that for, for since really the inception of Black Lives Matter. What do you
Yeah.
think? What do you think you would say to people who maybe are quick to react and make judgments? Because I know you posted something not too long ago about, I think it was you, about waiting for evidence, and just trying not to jump to conclusions. And whether or not you posted something about that, I'll have to look, because I know you post a
Mhm.
lot of good stuff. But what do you think about that, and how people are quick to rush to judgment?
Well, I think in the age of social media, everyone feels like they need to say something, just to feel like a good person.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing with the whole black square idea during like June or July. I forgot when it was, when people were posting and trying to protest the George Floyd incident. People just want to feel like they're doing something without actually doing something, because that's the easiest thing to do. But what I would tell people is, like, these processes are really complex, and you know having these investigations aren't easy. We need a society that will wait until the evidence comes out, and then go through the right processes. And people often show a very they show like a pessimism when it comes to processes nowadays, and
Mm-hmm.
they believe in people, but it should be the opposite. We should be very optimistic about processes and be very pessimistic about people,
Mm-hmm.
because processes are what makes things fair. I mean, for instance, sports. The reason why certain athletes excel over other athletes is because there's processes that lead to them starting, being the starters, and then them performing and showing that they're better than other people that play with them. And that's the reason why we know their names. It's not because someone it's not because, like, in sports today, that they have like a rule that a quota, for instance. And I try to tell people all the time, like, these quota things are bad too, because you're making the assumption that by social engineering um, population numbers of races and genders, that you'll automatically make a field better. And I don't think the literature shows that, and I don't think that's the right way to go. So I'll just tell people, I just think we should all wait for the evidence to come out, because usually it's not what we initially think it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I agree, and if basketball had a quota of Asian guys in this, it wouldn't be as entertaining. I might argue, even though that sounds racist. Asians are good at a lot
Um,
of things, but I'm not sure if basketball. Although Yao Ming and you've got some other
yeah,
ones.
yeah, Jeremy
Yeah,
Lin and all that.
yeah,
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 exactly. But
yeah. And
yeah. So I wanted to go over a couple of things you posted and just get your thoughts, elaborating on them. So one thing that I thought was really interesting that you tweeted, you also put on your Instagram. And by the way, your Instagram is EricsElectrons, and I love that name. It's alliterative and it shows your interest in physics, and it's pretty cool.
Thanks.
But you wrote on, let's see, I think it was just last month. You wrote criticism for X doesn't automatically imply endorsement/agreement of Y. We can criticize something without being on the opposing side of what we're criticizing. I find that to be extremely profound in a very simplistic way. You said it very simplistically and understandably, but it's so profound because if you an example of this is if I say, for example, the First Step Act that the Trump administration passed, which released thousands, or I'm not sure of the exact number, but quite a few mostly black men from jail for nonviolent drug offenses, and I think that's a good thing. There are so many people that are quick to jump to the assumption that I'm a blatant Trump supporter and that I support everything he does and love him as a person and think he's God and all these things. And that couldn't be further from the truth. I have
Mhm.
so much to criticize the guy about. I didn't vote for him in the first election. I still don't think he should be our president. Doesn't mean I like Joe Biden, but that's another example of exactly what you were talking about. If I say I don't think Trump should be our president, people will say, well, then you're going to vote for Joe Biden. It's like, no, 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 hold on. There are good and bad things about both, and then there are good and bad things about the good and bad things about both. So it's that nuance, that level of diving deep into a subject that's so lacking, and people are so quick to react and assume that if you're criticizing X, you agree with Y. So what are some examples of that's maybe happened in your life, or your thoughts on that?
I mean, me being black and not being a Black Lives Matter advocate is one. When I say, for instance, I'm against Black Lives Matter, they're like, oh, so you're saying that police brutality isn't a thing and it never happens, or you're pro Blue Lives Matter and you think that cops are gods and all this other stuff. Is like, no, like I just simply disagree with the ideology of Black Lives Matter. I disagree with them as a corporation, as
As an organization, exactly.
entity, or yeah, just everything. So
You don't
like,
disagree with the sentiment Black Lives Matter,
yeah,
lowercase.
or some of their arguments that they make, yeah, or yeah, the
Yeah,
lowercase Black Lives Matter, yeah.
right.
I disagree with uppercase
Yeah, the
B,
organization.
yeah, yeah. So it's very frustrating. And then what's even more frustrating is when I'm talking to other scientists and other academics, and you would think they would know better because they're trained to actually, think critically. But what I've found is that they're trained to think critically when it comes to the things that they do specifically. So if I'm talking to a microbiologist, he or she will be able to think critically about microbiology and the things surrounding that, but outside of microbiology, they're not able to apply that, and that's a
Right.
real big problem. And I have many different hypotheses for that, but I think one of them is I think people lack the philosophical training. Like they're not really trained in philosophy nearly as much, and they don't value philosophy. Scientists used to be called natural philosophers. Newton was called a natural philosopher. Galileo was, and everyone else from before then, they were called natural philosophers. They weren't called scientists at first. So philosophy is supposed to be a thing that we learn with science, sort of like we learn math in order to learn science like chemistry or physics. So yeah, I've faced so many people in and outside of academia who use those same fallacies or assumes evil intent whenever I simply say that a person has a point that they dislike, or I say that I'm against something that they really, really are passionate about.
That's
Or,
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, do you think that there's that in regards to people in the STEM fields or scientists not applying the same critical thinking that they apply within their narrow field in STEM to other subjects more broadly? Do you think that has something to do with uh, the the seeming the being afraid of seeming like you're neglecting or disregarding someone's emotions and feelings? Does that make sense? So if you're in a
Hmm.
class or if you're teaching a class or you're in a class or what have you, and you're studying a subject and you're applying critical thinking, you're applying this Socratic scientific method, um, you're looking at textbooks and you're
Hmm.
studying, I don't know, biomes or whatever, if you're talking about a biologist or particles in your field. But when you see videos like the George Floyd video, or you see people marching in the street, or you see videos of people crying and sobbing, and obviously the emotions and reactions that are coming for those people should cause a visceral reaction and an emotional reaction in anyone if you're not a sociopath. But do you think that that even though the critical thinking and the scientific method is so useful in a narrow field, and someone can understand that who's in that field, there's still the why is there still a disconnect outside of that? You mentioned a
Yeah,
bit of your
that's a really
hypothesis,
good
but
question. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think part of it, I said this on, I forgot where I said this at, but part of it is definitely they don't have the time to truly dig deep and learn about this stuff, or
Mhm.
they do, but they just choose not to, go through this. Like they know the very surface level things, like whatever they hear from Twitter, whatever they hear from news and things of that nature, because a lot and the STEM fields are very demanding when it comes to your time and your energy. You have to spend hours upon hours upon hours learning about a specific subject in a specific field at a specific time. So I just think that it's a time thing, and they don't spend the time to truly like dig deep and learn about these things. And then two, I think they don't experience what happens when you question the things that are being said on the news and the media and through the people in their immediate surroundings. And the third thing I would say is in academia, it's very, very left leaning, and it's more so identity politics, like friendly or identity friendly or intersectionality friendly, I would say. And
Mhm.
so they push this narrative very early as a freshman. So if you disagree, then you're basically disagreeing with the field. If you disagree with the field, then you're disagreeing with science, they say.
Right, right.
Even though that certain fields in the humanities are having a very bad replication problem, and they can't replicate a lot of their conclusions or their experiments, should I say. So yeah, it's a mixture of things, and I think they need to. I think there is a lack of people in the field who truly have a diverse set of viewpoints on
Mhm.
this, and they're easily they could cast away people simply because of their race, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I'm sure you've heard the whole like, oh, you believe this because you're white privilege or something like
Right,
that.
right, right.
That's a
Yeah.
very popular and common thing that a lot of people in academia say.
Mhm.
So, when they hear people or when they hear another viewpoint, and if you're not black or if you're not Hispanic or something like that, they will automatically just throw it away.
Mhm.
And you're not supposed to do that when it comes to science. You're supposed to consider those viewpoints, and you're supposed to question them and see where they go through that questioning and test that. But
Yeah.
people, like I said, don't apply their critical thinking skills or scientific training outside of their specific field in science.
It seems like a time problem when you're studying and you're in the STEM fields, like you said. It's very time consuming and it requires a lot of focus and mental energy. And it's much easier to not have to use and tap into more of your energy resources and to just kind of go along with something on a sort of surface emotional level when you've just spent 12 hours studying microbiomes or what have you. So that's understandable. But yeah, I've definitely gotten the white privilege thing. I've definitely had people tell me that I can't, that I shouldn't be commenting on a subject about black people, say, because I'm not black. And while of course I understand the direct experience is something that I'll never have, just like I'll never experience what it's like to be a woman or what it's like to be 7 feet tall or what it's like to be 5 feet tall.
Mm.
Not to say that that being black in America is the same as that you have a less unique experience or even an equally unique experience if you're black in America than being 5 feet tall. I don't know, but by the same logic, it's like a female should never go and see a male gynecologist because they don't have a vagina. So
Yeah,
so if they don't have that direct experience, why should they be able? And I'm not saying that I've studied all of this to the extent that a gynecologist has that. Maybe not the best
yeah,
example. I'll come up with another one besides that. But so it's an interesting bit of logic there. And in your field, logic, reason, and the method of continuing to question and look for evidence and hold up a theory and purposely try and refute it so that if it's shown to be irrefutable and it's been peer reviewed and multiple people are trying to refute it and it can't be refuted, then it becomes what I guess a fact or a theorem. I guess theory to the layman means something different than theory to someone in the science world. But yeah, it's just so
yeah.
maybe you could talk about some of the research you've done into Black Lives Matter and police violence and basically everything that surrounds race in this country, especially and having the extra bonus and perspective of that you do of being black in America. Maybe you could tell me a little bit about how and what changed your mind more so than just the early on with Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown.
Yeah, so like first thing, I think you spoke about something really important was the whole lived experience thing. I think that's one of the craziest ideas that come out of academia in a long time because, you know, we don't have to know what um, we don't have to be a chef to know a badly cooked meal. You know, we don't have to be a plumber to know that a toilet is clogged. You know, like there's we could know things and things that people could be more knowledgeable about a subject even if it relates to someone. You know, I know plenty of people who know more about Black American history or African history than me, and then they're white because they done the necessary work in academia or even outside of academia to do their research on this, and that's the reason why they know more. And it has nothing to do like this weird idea of lived experience where our race gives us like these magical powers of knowing everything that relates to us is so strange to me. But on to what you were talking about. I I have like different experiences, especially when it comes to uh, police brutality or when it comes to like crime. Obviously, I come from Oakland, California, and Pittsburgh, California, and Pittsburgh wasn't a violent place, even though violence did happen, and because a lot of people from there were from Oakland, San Francisco, and everything. But Oakland was very violent at the time when I was over there, and it I mean, like, I've had friends that lost their lives to gun violence. I've had friends that got locked up and went to prison, still in prison to this day. I also have friends that got into law enforcement. I also have family in law enforcement. So growing up, I've had the taste of both sides. I never got into the crime element in terms of like my friends that did, but I was around that. I was around that a lot. So I have very firsthand experience with that. And When people come up with the excuses of, they don't have resources, or they don't do this and that, and that's the reason why crime is so high in these areas, I just think that's BS, because there are many people such as myself that never went to jail, that never committed any violent crime, and we came from the same place. And that happens a lot, and in most of these places, most of the people aren't violent, they don't have records and things of that nature. So that argument of why there's so much crime, it gets um, the well gets poisoned when, white supremacy gets thrown in there or something crazy like that. And the easy way to simply debunk that would be, you could look at the crime statistics back in the 50s, the 40s, or even the 60s. They were a lot lower than they were today in the Black community, and there was more racism back then than there is today, even though some people tried to argue with me on many occasions that there is more racism today than there was back then. But yeah, so like just looking up little stuff like that, after finding out that Black Lives Matter founders weren't changing their minds when the evidence showed that they were wrong, I looked up more things on police shootings, because before that I had read Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, and I agreed with a lot of it prior to Black Lives Matter coming up. And then after, I read it again, but then I also read The War on Cops by Heather McDonald. Great book, a phenomenal book. I read a lot of Thomas Sowell's books, like, and he doesn't really touch on it heavily, but he does like skate over some of the most popular arguments there. And yeah, and ever since then I've been trying to understand like each argument, and when you present people with these facts, they usually act in a very hostile way, as if you want people to get locked up, or if you want this or that to happen. But like, I remember reading stuff from like the 80s, when the crack era was there, and that was really bad, and the Black community in New York, for instance, wanting more police presence. And now today people are asking for less police presence with more crime, and that just doesn't make sense to me. So yeah, it's a weird time to be in, because simply just stating statistics, or understanding past arguments and then new arguments, um, get you put in a weird place, and you're kind of caught in a crossfire. But I'd rather be wedded to the truth than totally divorced from reality.
It seems like every time I've brought up statistics about police brutality in this country, and when I do, I primarily cite the Roland Fryer study. Roland Fryer.
That's a really good one.
And what I've been trying to do also is change my verbiage and my vernacular. So instead of saying Roland Fryer, Black Harvard economist, and also I think liberal or centrist, I would prefer to say Harvard economist and centrist who happens to be Black, because I think that's the order of importance there, in my opinion. I think that,
yeah, and I like
Martin
doing
Luther
something
King,
even yeah, I like doing something even further. I like saying that, but not mentioning he's Black, and then
yeah,
someone saying something like, oh, he says that because he's a
yeah.
white academic, and then I go, oh no, actually he's Black.
That's
So
right.
you
Yeah, I'm
know
sure. I'm sure you've heard people like,
yeah.
Black conservatives, like or conservatives who happen to be Black, like Larry Elder, and there was another guy, I forgot his name, but they've both done radio interviews, and then the generally speaking, the white lady on the other end is calling them, oh, that's because you're a white man. And there were a couple of instances, maybe I'll put it up in the edited version of this video, and then they have to say, oh, sorry, just because I don't sound like Ja Rule or something doesn't mean I'm not fucking Black.
Yeah.
So it shows a very narrow-minded, strange narrow-mindedness from largely a lot of people on the left nowadays, and
Yeah.
I think that assumption that someone isn't black because they don't talk a certain way. I think that actually happens, unfortunately, across the board, and
Oh yeah,
I hope
especially
that
in the black
changes.
communities, I would say. Yeah,
Yeah. You
yeah,
don't sound black, things like that, and
yeah.
it's a very strange. Yeah. But so you were mentioning that you were kind of touching on something that reminded me of what another post, which I'll bring up, that you posted in just a second. But the kind of summation of it, the idea of it is kind of that victimhood is almost being seen as a culture. Okay, so I remember you, or not as a culture, a currency. So you were mentioning that you came from Oakland and Pittsburgh, California, and knew people who were involved in crime, or just maybe not the most noble lifestyles, and
Hmm.
you were from those same places and got out of that and made the conscious decision to get out of there. um, Two things. What do you do you what percentage would you say, I mean, I guess it would probably varies a lot, but how big of an influence do you think the lack of knowledge being presented to people that they can get out of situations like that, or might have to work harder but can get out of it like you did, is prominent, is a factor? And also, what why do you think that so many people are almost using victimhood and this notion that they're oppressed as a currency?
Um, so first, I think a lot of it has to do with uh, broken homes. You know, we talk about fatherless homes a lot, and I think that's definitely a big problem. But just broken homes in general, because I had someone he wasn't a friend, but he was more like an acquaintance. I mean, I played basketball with him, this that, but I never hung out with him. And I think it was like 6 or 7 years ago, I found out that he actually robbed a jewelry store and like stabbed like one of the people there, killing them, and then had a shootout with the police officer, was caught, and then now he's spending life in prison for murder and
Jeez.
robbing. So like, um, when I look at that, he had a mom and dad in his life, but from what I know about him, I know that it wasn't a good situation with his mom and dad. So um, it was definitely a broken home, but he had a father in his life. So it's a very complex problem, but I think broken families are the main thing that is there. And then, like you said, the fact that people don't do what is necessary with the knowledge, because there's so many influences. There's the temptation of making fast money, for instance. Like, you go and you see, certain people in your neighborhood having these nice cars, or getting the girls and all this other stuff, and you go, oh, I want to do that too. And then you find out they sell drugs or something. And then,
Mhm.
of course, naturally, being young and impressionable, you're going to want to do that because, like, that they get all the girls, and then that's all you're thinking about. That's a
Mhm.
certain
Mhm.
moment of your life. So that's part of it. But I I read something actually. I'm not sure if it was from the 90s. There were, I think it was in LA. Many people thought that, and this was a predominantly black area. They thought that most people who get into gangs, they aren't taking advantage of the resources that they have, because they think that they have resources. And I think that's what it is. It's like you're not taking advantage of the things that you do have. And because I come from one of the academically worst schools in Northern California, and there were still people who went to Chico State or UC Berkeley out of my school because they did the necessary work to get there. And if more people did that, they would have those opportunities as well. And I mean, given all the scholarship opportunities and stuff, especially if you're a minority of some type, you should be able to find a way. And then sometimes people don't know of those things, but uh, I just think that accountability isn't nearly talked about nearly as much. Like, self accountability isn't talked
Mhm.
about nearly as much in these conversations, but that's a lot of it. Just people make stupid decisions based on their momentary, like, to feed the pleasures that they have right now. It's like Hinduism in a way. But yeah, I think it's a very complex issue, but
Mhm.
the things I named, I think, are the most significant factors that play out to why they're that way.
Well, that's a perfect segue to uh, a post you made of a person that we're both mutually interested in because she says some very profound things and is also just I think she's cool as hell. And
Yeah.
I've actually listened to interviews with her and she just seems like a really chill person. Her name is Aisha Akambi and she's a British Nigerian British. She's British, but she's of Nigerian descent, and she's a fashion designer. And you posted a quote of her, and I've posted many quotes of her, but the one you posted that I wanted to read is, quote, "We also live in an age of fragility because victimhood is the only thing that protects you from critique, responsibility, and the expectation to be reasonable." And I'm going to read your caption that you wrote. Victimhood mentality is one of the biggest problems plaguing humanity today. Anyone can be a victim, but only those that choose to adopt a victimhood mentality will stay a victim. Being a victim of something is often outside of our control. A series of unfortunate events can happen without warning or preparation. There are good people who do bad things and bad people who do bad things. We can take precautions, but there is no 100% foolproof way of avoiding being victimized. And I'll finish. It's long, but important that I read this. Uh, what happens to you isn't always within your control, but why stress over what's not within your control? What what good does that do? Does that do us? Sorry, my screen is glitching. To me,
It's
it
all
seems like a huge waste of time and energy that can be spent on learning to be better. Championing victimhood mentality is a choice that leads to mostly negative outcomes. An unpopular but evidence based way of doing better in any arena has been to understand what went wrong, identify ways of avoiding or preparing for it in the future, and move on from it by taking 100% accountability for the things within your control. The weaponization of victimhood is the new normal. Every political group weaponizes victimhood in some way, shape, or form to appeal to the emotions of the populace. I didn't realize how long it's supposed to. Okay, it's almost over. It's really
right.
great though. It's really great though.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you,
a,
thank you.
a, yeah, a person from a perceived privileged quote unquote group can't criticize a person from a perceived oppressed group due to them being due to them victim blaming. But who's really a victim if you have the power to shut down all discourse in companies as well as academic institutions are meeting your every demand because you're the quote unquote victim? To change the way you think, that starts with not weaponizing victimhood. It's good to remind yourself that we are all fragmented collections of atoms making sense of the world using our selfish genes, little Richard Dawkins there, to express our to express ourselves to survive and thrive in this world. I mean, that's very well said. And you're a great writer. Another reason why I wanted to talk to you here. I
Thank
guess
you.
I was gonna ask you to elaborate on that. I forgot how long it is. But long for a reason because you're very precise with your words there. Um, yeah, but I mean, what are you thinking about that? Because it's just it seems like 100% truth to me. I don't know.
Yeah, I think if most people want to know about the weaponization of victimhood, I think a good place to start would be The Madness of Crowds by Douglas Murray.
Yeah, I
That's a really
just
good
finished
book.
that not so long ago.
Yeah,
It's
that's an
excellent.
awesome book. Yeah.
Hmm.
So he tells you like how, you know, being gay or transsexual is being weaponized, how race is being not transsexual, being weaponized,
Hmm.
or any other identity is being weaponized in order to gain some type of political power over one group or another.
Hmm.
And that issue is one that I've seen ever since about 2012 or probably even before that. I would say, probably like 2010, maybe, like with the
Hmm.
whole like uh, debate about religion and, people being a little bit too soft on um, Islam and things of that nature, or just whenever there was a terrorist attack, there was a sort of like, oh, we should leave this alone type of sentiment behind it. And that's graduated to race nowadays, and especially with all this stuff about police brutality and the affirmative action stuff and critical race theory. So I think one of the biggest and scariest ideas that anyone could come up with is victimizing, or not victimizing, weaponizing race and weaponizing any identity, because when you do that, you're kind of cheapening what it is, and you're not allowing people to actually learn from these different identities. What you're doing is you're using it to harm other people, and you're pushing people to be of the opposite extreme. The reason why the alt-right exists and then all these other fringe groups exist usually is because of people pushing them in that area, and then that's where they found comfort, that's where they found acceptance, that's where they could say things without being attacked for having a difference of opinion. And we I think society today needs to move more towards civil discourse, and that's how we could do it. But weaponizing victimhood is not only harmful for the individual, but it's harmful for society as a whole.
Yeah, I totally agree. What it does is it diminishes legitimate claims of homophobia, transphobia, racism, all the isms, not to discount them, the real instances of them, because of course they still happen. But it should seem obvious to most people, especially of our age and older, that that didn't grow up in this strange social media environment where narratives that aren't necessarily true when the evidence is looked at closely, or lack thereof. For people of our age or older, it should seem fairly obvious, especially for, I would say, black men and women that are in their golden years. It should seem quite obvious that we've made quite a bit of advancement since Jim Crow, which was like not even a lifetime ago. So it is so close to us in history, where when you see videos of people being hosed down, and you hear about slavery just 150 years ago. I mean, there really is, in the grand timescale of the universe, it's nothing. It's yesterday, or last minute, or last second in that huge timeline. So it's understandable when some people see that to have it so fresh in their minds, or in their minds at all, and think it's possible or likely that something similar to it is happening now. But it should seem so obvious. So Douglas Murray said, in that book, Madness of Crowds, he says, imagine a train pulling into a station, right? And this train has gone on this long journey of racism and slavery and horrible atrocities, which is the history of the world, by the way. The African slave trade is one of the worst in history, but it wasn't the only one. And which it's not whataboutism, it's just to try and get a more grand picture of the fact that history in general was pretty shitty for everybody, or all around the world. Anyway, he talks about how we were kind of pulling into this station, we're almost at our destination. And then right as we're about to get there, the train shoots off out of the station. And that's kind of what it feels like. It feels like I grew up in the 90s. Both of us grew up in the 90s for the most part. And I didn't even think about it. My best friend when I was 9 years old was a black girl named Fuchsia. She was cool as hell, man. She was just my friend. It wasn't in my mind. And I think you posted something else that I'll read in a second, which about, and I'm totally going off on tangents and not formulating a
that's fine.
coherent thought here. But you posted something about how people shouldn't equate being colorblind with not seeing color at all, which is hopefully not what most people say by that, but rather to not judge someone based on their skin color, over their actions or their character, as Martin Luther King would put it. I totally lost my train of thought there because there's so much to think about. But what you said in that post was very profound, and it's refreshing that you're not following the same narrative that so many people are following now. I don't know. Did I have a question in there? I can't even. I have so much I want to say that I couldn't formulate an accurate thought.
I think you were going towards another post I did. Like you were mentioning it, but I don't think you got to it.
Yeah, I think I was trying to get somewhere. Where was this? Isn't it? Oh, now okay. Let me see here. Let's see here. What's happening? Now audio is playing. Okay, hold on.
It's all good.
Uh, well, how about this? We'll just move on to this. So I did want to ask you. I wrote in my notes that I wanted to ask you about identity politics and wokeness in STEM, and we touched on it a little bit already. But
Yeah.
because you're in that particular field, I definitely want to get your thoughts on it. So you posted, quote, if I had $1 for every non-black person in STEM who preaches on social media to support black voices or listen to black people, but at the same time blocks slash unfollows blacks that question or disagrees with them, I'd have enough money to pay for all of their mental health counseling. What? Elaborate on that for me. What? Yeah.
Well, that was inspired by someone that, that was an acquaintance of mine that we would have conversations about different things regarding stuff in STEM, be it science or non-science stuff. But then, when everything happened with George Floyd, I saw her posting like very like um she was weaponizing race, as we were talking about before. She was basically saying, if this is a white woman, by the way. She was like, if you're not posting about this or doing this, then you're a bad person, basically. And
Yeah,
doing this
silence
whole
of
thing
white silence is violence.
is
Yeah.
violence. Yeah, yeah. It's such a horrible thing to say too, by the way. But
Yeah.
and it's sort of a remix of what Martin Luther King was saying, which I actually disagree with Martin Luther King on a lot of times, because Martin Luther King basically said, like, being silent about racism is basically, condoning it in a way. That's not always the case, because there are certain things where there are certain exceptions of that. But I get what he was going towards. But people have kind of upgraded that or downgraded that term to mean, like, any silence is actual violence, which
Mm-hmm.
means that they should aggress you, and you should be harmed by it, through doxing or physical harm and such. So she had that rhetoric on her page, and of course I said something about it, and then we had like a little comment back and forth. And then I noticed that whenever I would ask her certain questions or talk to her after that, she was very short with me, or she didn't reply at all. And of course, like, like, I understand we're all busy and no one is required to talk to you, or and all this other stuff. So I don't have that type of entitlement issue. Like, it's cool, but it was just weird. And then finally she came out and she was just like, you know what, I just had to unfollow you because I couldn't understand. I don't condone any of the things that you were saying about, Black Lives Matter, and I think you're wrong, and you're saying a whole bunch of right-wing talking points, this and the third, and just grilling me about the fact that I was saying this. But what really pissed me off was the fact that she said, um, one, that I was being insensitive to black voices,
Mm-hmm.
because it's just like, okay, like what's in it for me to be insensitive to someone that's just like me.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of, like, if oppression was actually happening, like, what's in it for me, and then two, it was just like, well, you're kind of being insensitive to my voice, and I am black, about disagreeing, just because you feel passionately about something. And then she said something to the effect of, you know like, you what did she say? I wish I remember what she said, but she basically said that I was anti-black in a way. She said something to
Mm-hmm.
that degree.
Mm-hmm.
And when she said that, I was like, oh, okay. And then it made me think of that quote. I posted on Twitter, and then from Twitter, I went somewhere else with it. And then I started writing like a blog post about it and doing a whole bunch of other stuff. And yeah, it, and that wasn't the only experience I've had in regards to this. I mean, I've had academics like fully like make groups, because academics like have many groups. They have like Slack groups, they have Instagram groups and email groups and all that, so they could talk about not only research, but like just basic things in life,
Mm-hmm.
and to kind of connect with one another, just in case if they're in town. And I've been kicked out of those groups for simply having a difference of opinion. I've been talked about and mass unfollowed because I pissed someone off that ran those groups. Tons of things, and I've noticed that most of the time, like 9 times out of 10, it was mostly um, it was non-black, or it was non-black women that were, because a lot of the things I get into it about with people are usually feminism and racial matters. And so they would say these things about me and try to they prevented me from having opportunities sometimes. Like sometimes I would have like an interview set up with a certain magazine or something I'm doing, and then they would talk to them and have them reconsider their thoughts about that, and then I wouldn't get this, or just tons of stuff have happened to me over the years, and I realized like how catty and mean girls like STEM really is. And that whole post was basically dedicated to that. And I've experienced that a lot throughout my time in academia, and it's made me really reconsider wanting to even like go to grad school, because there's just too many soft people in academia, and I can't stand it.
It seems like academia in particular has just become an echo chamber. People
Hmm.
patting themselves on the back, walking around agreeing with each
Yeah.
other,
Hmm.
and that it's more of a popularity contest and more of a
That's exactly what it is.
to use a derogatory term, it's more of a dick measuring contest to show
Yeah.
who can come up with a better theory faster, but also who can empathize with people who are emotional faster,
Yeah.
outside of the narrow field that they're in.
Yeah.
And it is a very, speaking of narrow, it's a very narrow, funneled, tunnel vision sort of, lacking a nuanced way to see the world, where if someone doesn't agree with you politically or sociopolitically or philosophically, uh, even though they are of the race that you are proclaiming to be standing up for and to be an avenger for, it doesn't matter. So what it
Yeah.
shows is that it's not all about race, which I
Hmm.
actually think it shouldn't be. So
Hmm.
it's this weird feedback loop or something that they've
Yeah.
put themselves in, because they're contradicting themselves all the time, where they say amplify black voices, but then if that black voice, whatever a black voice is, which is
Yeah.
such a
Yeah.
weird thing to say. It's like, as a human being as a black
Yeah.
voice, like,
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
just so weird. Just doesn't, it's tough. It doesn't register with me, that sort
Yeah.
of
And
terminology.
they'll
But
put it all over their profiles, like
yeah,
hashtag amplify black voices, or support black businesses and all this
yeah,
other stuff. And it's just like, oh, but you block me and stuff
yeah. But
for
only
just
if they
simply
agree with
disagreeing
you.
with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. It's
Yeah.
like you and I don't want to use terminology like that, right? Like, we
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
just
exactly.
be
I use
humans
it
and
very
just.
tongue in cheek, like that's
But yeah,
whenever I use it.
yeah, but that's my point. It's like you and I are just. It seems like one reason why I wanted to interview and talk to you and befriend you is because it seems like you and I just we want to try and reason with people and get people. And again, people should reason with us too if we're wrong about stuff. And I think we would agree that we welcome that. But
Yeah.
in statements that people make and assertions people make that are false or shaky at best, if you actually push them on it and look for the evidence surrounding their claims, for those people, we we use those terms and their terminology to try and have an impossible conversation with them. Speaking of which, this one's pretty good here. I've just started it. How to have impossible
Oh yeah.
conversations. James Lindsay and Peter Boghossian. Anyway, but we use those terms to play their game so we can fit into a conversation with them, which might be the only way you could change their minds. But if you simply press back on them for a second, you say, hey, so you want to amplify black voices, right? Or you want more minorities in politics, or you want more women in politics. Well, it's pretty simple. Did you vote for Ben Carson? Did you vote for Herman Cain? You know, did you vote for Carly Fiorina, or what's her name up in Canada, Sarah Palin? Well,
Mm.
they're women, they're black. You know, Clarence Thomas just swore in Amy Coney Barrett. You know, a black man just swore in a female, but the left wants nothing to
Oh
do with
yeah,
it
yeah.
because it doesn't fit their
It's
narrative.
funny how they attack her too. Like they attack her. If she was on the left,
They
like
would love.
they would love her. They would love her, one, no matter how, like, you know, her credentials are, and then two, any criticism would be looked at as sexism. But
Right.
because she's on the right, then all of a sudden any criticism is because she's an evil person, and that's the issue here. It's they look at anyone other as an evil person, and although that she's a woman, she's not politically a woman. You know,
Correct.
she's politically trying to serve men by their own logic, and
Right.
that's how I think people look at me when I disagree with them. I'm not black anymore. I'm not politically black. You know, and because I'm not politically black, they feel the need that I need to be canceled or whatever. And to clarify too, like when I speak about non-black or white women in STEM, I'm not saying that there is a specific problem because, you know, they're white women. It's more so that in the science community or science communication community, most of the people with the biggest voices and the biggest platforms are white women in STEM.
Mm.
So they dominate that sphere in terms of science communication. So
Well,
usually,
I just want to quickly say, sorry to cut you
mhm.
off, but you know,
Oh no.
about that, I totally understand what you're saying about using
Hmm.
terms white women. You know, I'll put it this way: if you turn on the video game Grand Theft Auto, you're not going to pull out your Duck Hunt game from Super Nintendo, gun from Super Nintendo, and try and play with that. And what I
Hmm.
mean by that is, why have a conversation with someone who's playing a certain game and is using a certain set of verbs and language attributes? Why go into that trying to play Duck Hunt when it's a completely different game, right? So when you say that, it's them who are making these claims and assertions using uh, terms of black voices, using
Hmm.
Black Lives Matter, and using these terms of immutable characteristics. So you're going to play that game in seeing the contradictions and use their logic against them in many ways, or at least use their terms against them. That's how any smart person would engage someone in a niche of conversation with language.
Yeah, yeah,
So
exactly.
anyway.
And that's why I attempt to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, well, okay, so we'll wrap this up shortly. I just want to ask you about one post that I saw from someone whom I won't name on Instagram, but someone relatively popular. They posted a story, so it went away pretty quickly. It says, "Let me make this clear," and this is a white woman again. Let me make this clear. If you vote for Trump, you are racist. Donald Trump will not denounce white supremacists because he is one. What do you think about that?
BS, because I mean, for starters, he's denounced white supremacy so many times. I've counted at least three
Mm-hmm.
different occasions. Shortly after the Charlottesville incident, he did. There was a phone call conversation that he had when I think he was running, and he made that stupid comment about he doesn't know who the KKK was and all that. But then they called him to be like, "Oh, how do you not know who the KKK was? Will you denounce them?" And then he was like, "Yeah, of course I denounced them." So he denounced it then, and then just recently he denounced them also. So he has denounced them many, many times. And then two, like I don't understand how a racist person could create something like the First Step Act or
Mm-hmm.
the whole thing of giving millions of dollars to HBCUs for
Mm-hmm.
years to come, and then all this
Securing
other
it,
stuff.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pardoning Jack Johnson for Jack Johnson's family, and Jack Johnson is was the first black heavyweight champion of the world. He died
Mm-hmm.
a long time ago, but his family had this stigma over them because, you know, he was wanted by the United States and he had to flee because of like the crimes that they had against him. And Trump pardoned that. I think it was. a year or two ago or something. So
Yeah,
that
I
was
think
really nice.
even more recently than that, he granted clemency to a black guy who was locked up for laws that were written by Joe Biden and Bill Clinton
Yeah,
under the
yeah,
'94 crime bill.
yeah. He released a black woman that I think Kim Kardashian helped, or two black women I think that Kim Kardashian were brought to his attention. Uh, there's someone running for Congress, I think in Georgia. Um, she was like exonerated from her past crimes or whatnot
Mm-hmm.
due to
Mm-hmm.
him. I mean, he like if that's racist, then we need more of that, we really do,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
like that doesn't even make any sense. So when people say like he's this like flaming racist, there's no explicit example of him being like a flaming racist. I just don't see it. And I mean, when people say that, it doesn't make any sense to me, and I just think it's BS.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's strange to me that there are millions of people in this country right now, largely due to media, and social media is included in media. A lot of people think that CNN and Fox are much different than Instagram or Facebook, and they're not. Those companies have the same influence on each other, really, that they do on people individually. But um, uh, there's so many people in this country who think that Donald Trump is this like you said, flaming racist or raging racist or whatever.
Yeah,
And I can understand why at certain moments you're just like at the first presidential debate, hey dude, you were given a fucking a softball, just knock it out of the
yep,
park and say you denounce that so people shut up.
exactly.
And he kind of skirted around it, and that was kind of weird. But it still doesn't, I think he lets his ego get in his way because he's so egotistical.
Yeah, and he was
But what
annoyed at the fact that you kept getting
yeah,
asked the
that he
same
had to do it
questions.
again.
Yeah,
Yeah, sure, but just bite your tongue and do it
exactly.
so that people shut up. And he was interviewed at a town hall style meeting, interviewed the next week, and he did it very clearly. But what's interesting to me, aside from him on video having denounced white supremacy multiple times, there is actual institutional evidence that you could consider racist from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, which is really interesting. Joe Biden authoring the '94 crime bill. There's a bunch of other stuff out there of Joe Biden just using poor rhetoric about black people primarily, but then Kamala Harris, even more in some ways than Biden, withholding evidence to keep people in prison past their sentences in San Francisco,
Hmm.
your original neck of the woods,
Yep.
to use them for labor, laughing at the when questioned about jailing mostly black and brown people, as Tulsi Gabbard put it at one of their debates a while ago, for nonviolent drug offenses. And what's interesting is that she's half Indian, but while she's running, she's black. And I
Yeah.
always find that kind of strange. I think the concept of race is silly in general because we're all gray, shades of gray, and we're
Hmm.
all humans
Hmm.
first and foremost.
Yeah.
Um, but to use these terms, it's like, is she only black when it's convenient?
Yeah,
And
that's
this is
exactly what it
another
is.
this yeah, we're just circling back. It's another example of what you posted about, which is this idea of victimhood as a currency, where if you're seen as oppressed, well, now all of a sudden you have some sort of leg up on being able to help people that are also oppressed. And again, it's complicated, and there's a modicum of truth to that in some ways, at least in being able to relate to those people and maybe know what's best for them in some aspects. But the idea that no one else can, if you're not of that ilk, this is a really dangerous game that we're playing. It's really scary.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really scary. Yeah, and then it's not a good game to play. We've seen this though when it came to Obama's presidency. Like,
Mm.
the fact that he wasn't a biracial president, he was a black president, and
Yeah.
he was a black man running, and it was everything was because he was black, the good and the bad. So yeah, I mean, it's just the same story being played again with the Kamala Harris thing, and we know that Joe Biden picked Kamala Harris because like it made sense to do so politically. Like
Hmm.
to have a black woman instead of a white woman or even an Asian woman, it would or even a man, because he promised to have a woman. It just made sense to do that for him politically. And then also like I ask people all the time, like, what if Kamala Harris or Joe Biden, or no, what if Trump had said the things that Kamala Harris or Joe Biden has said? Like the fact that Kamala Harris said that she listened to Tupac in college, even though Tupac wasn't even out when she was in college,
Right.
or Joe Biden saying that if you don't vote for him, you ain't black. You know, like if Trump said that, it would have been news all the time. People would bring it up all the time. He's never even said anything close to that.
Yeah.
But that just gets skated away. And I've had many conversations with people about that. Like they'll come to me and it's like, I just can't support Trump. I got to vote him out. I got to do this. And then it's just like, okay, I can understand you not supporting someone, but like why? And then they're like, because he's a racist. And then I tell them the Joe Biden quote, or I say certain things that Kamala Harris has done to pander to black people, and then they just go, well, that's necessary and everything, but Trump is the actual like real racist and blah blah blah. And I'm just like, okay, I can't talk with a person like that because you obviously made up your mind. So yeah, it's just convenient for people, I guess, to focus on Kamala Harris being black, to answer your question.
Yeah, it's a strange environment. We it's something we can expect from politicians, and on the left, the two that are running are politicians. Joe Biden, a career politician, 47 years in government.
Yeah.
I legitimately can't name one accomplishment other than the crime bill, which I wouldn't consider. I mean, technically, it's an accomplishment as though he accomplished it, but and they got it done. But I don't know if that necessarily did good things for people. I think
Yeah.
the evidence shows it didn't. Um, and you just look at the Trump administration, and I still don't like the guy as a person. But the First Step Act, the initiative on HBCUs, I mean, you've got Herschel Walker, the football legend, talking about his long relationship with Trump and how he's not a racist. Trump was a Democrat in New York City for 20 years or something like that. And
Yeah.
there's pictures of him sitting with Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson, all these civil rights guys, and only now that he's a Republican and is running and is president, is he this big bad racist guy. And
Yeah.
everyone does questionable things, but to think that he exclusively is some sort of KKK neo-Nazi or something is really pretty strange.
Yeah, it's really strange, especially in the hip hop community. It's weird that people aren't acting like Trump wasn't referenced in a good way in hip
Oh
hop songs
yeah.
for a long time. I mean, even the late Mac Miller, he made a song called Donald Trump. It was one of his come out songs, and Donald Trump was in the music video, I believe. So like hip hop loved Trump before Trump ran as a Republican. Many black leaders, they were around Trump a very long time before denouncing him and stuff because it was a cool thing to do. And that to me, it shows that people are just they have no spine, and they're just doing whatever the crowd sways them to do.
Yeah,
There's no
well,
leadership.
it seems like now you have people like 50 Cent essentially saying that he's going to vote for Trump because he saw Joe Biden's projected tax plan and was like, I think he said, I don't want to be, I'm 50 Cent, I don't want to be 20 Cent, something like that. And then this other guy, Waka Flocka Flame. I mean, I've never listened to his music, but apparently he's out there voting for Trump, and some other guy with tattoos all over his face, Lil Pump or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not up on that. Now I feel fucking old, man. I'm like, what? I used to love it. Hey, listen, I grew up listening to Jay-Z and Nas in
Oh,
New York
got you.
City, Tribe
Yeah.
Called Quest. I mean, even
Oh
though
yeah, the good
I
stuff,
was
the good
listening to
stuff.
that,
Yeah.
past when it came out, but I was even listening to Ludacris and shit. We want to talk about Georgia, all the what is it? Lil Wayne, obviously, Birdman.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
anyway. Um, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, no, I'm right there with you. I mean, uh, I have a background in songwriting, and then also like I have a lot of rapper friends and producer friends and all that other stuff. So I pay attention to hip hop a lot more than most, and that's one thing I want to show on my platforms more so is like my love for music in general because I love classical music. I love old school like rock and roll type. I love the jazz era, like all of that, and a lot of that ties into the identity politics stuff in a strange way in many ways. But there's a beauty in that, and learning from a lot of the people of the past, especially you know, people that people haven't heard of, like for instance Zora Neale Hurston. She was a black conservative of like the early 1900s, I believe, and she would talk about all the time, like, yeah, you know, racism is here, but you know, it doesn't affect me as a person, and I think that I'm an American first, and I want to live throughout society as that, and I want to be the best person that I can be for my society, you know, and sentiments or viewpoints like that is not often found. You know, there's this very anti-American attitude and anti like individualistic attitude in America, and I think we need to go back more so towards, you know, being pro, you know, um, American values,
Yeah.
at least. Yeah.
I agree. I think that's a great message for young people to hear, especially young African Americans who are growing up in this environment, thinking that, you know, everyone's out to get them if that's what they're being told, or primarily police. Well, maybe you could give one sort of last message before we wrap it up about what you think people in general across the country need to hear, let alone, you know, young people.
Um, I would say first, like, study history, but don't study the history that, you know, that tickles your ideology,
Mm-hmm.
or that pleasures you. Study the history of people like Booker T. Washington, if you want to study like Black history in America. Booker T. Washington was a former slave, and he made schools and different jobs for a lot of the Black people at his time. He did like this. He spoke in Atlanta like with the president at the time, and then all this other stuff. I mean, he's done a lot in his lifetime, but because he was a Black conservative, he doesn't get talked about when it comes to like, you know, Black history or Black American history. Um, Zora Neale Hurston was a great writer, and she was also a scientist, I believe, too, or something of that nature. And you know, she was phenomenal too. Frederick Douglass. I mean, learning history to not repeat what, you know, your the bad things that people are doing now is very important, but it's also important to learn history in order to just to get an idea of what people back then thought. And if people who are in worse situations can still have that like humanity to say, like, you know, we're all humans, and we should be treated fairly based on the fact that we're humans, like, I don't understand why they can't happen now. And then also, like, we have all this information at our fingertips. You know, there's no excuse to not become knowledgeable on a subject, or um to become a slave to our biases. You know, we should always try to vary our resources in terms of the news we consume. We should vary the type of people we talk to, and we should have civil conversations. Like, most of all, you know, like, we need to have these impossible conversations, as you said before, because that's the only way we'll truly be able to learn about one another, because we have more similarities than we do differences. No matter what race you are, no matter how dark or how light, no matter how tall or short you are, we have more similarities than differences. And we could come to the table and find commonalities in our values and principles if we're able to look at one another as human beings first, and also know that we're not arguing from bad faith when we ask tough questions. So yeah, that's all I would probably say.
Awesome. Awesome, man. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, as far as having knowledge at our fingertips, the only unfortunate thing is that the AI algorithms and Google and artificial intelligence are slowly becoming our overlords, and narrowing our ability to, you know, find and disseminate, uh, you know, a wide array of knowledge. And it's now, you know, if you look up history on Google, or racial history in this country, the first thing you'll find is like the 1619 Project, or something that
Oh my
you know,
gosh.
or you know,
Or
what's the guy's name,
or
Howard
I tried
Zinn, or some of
something.
these people.
Yeah, I tried something. I looked up white families, and on Google it had nothing but black families, and I was like, "What in the world is this?" Like,
Yeah, I've seen that. It's a bit
like
strange.
stuff like that is very strange. But yeah, algorithms are a problem, and I would say DuckDuckGo and other search engines that are encrypted and don't keep your information.
Yeah.
Those are definitely good alternatives to
I
Google.
use DuckDuckGo already. Yep.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, that's good.
I've
That's
got
good.
I've got a piece of tape over my camera on my laptop. I've got my tinfoil hat in the back. I've got
You're ready
I
already.
yeah.
Are you on BitChute, the website for the backup your YouTube videos?
No, maybe I should be. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, yeah, you
once I
should.
post this video of us two white supremacists, I'll probably get shut down. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, I'll check out
You
BitChute.
definitely want to do that just to have an alternative to everything.
Well, I think as far as artificial intelligence goes and all these algorithms, I think the best way to combat racism is to, like Morgan Freeman said, stop referring to each other as black and white. And in this regard, something Morgan Freeman didn't say, we should refer to each other as numbers. And our skin tone can be from 0 to 100 million or something, and then we can each have, or maybe let's do 7 billion and just increase it for each person on the planet, and that way we'll truly fall in line with our upcoming artificial intelligent overlords, robot leaders.
Yeah.
That's what I think. Anyway, well, it's a pleasure talking to you, man. You're really interesting, and I hope we can do this again sometime.
Oh yeah.
Where can people find you on social media and all that?
I'm on Twitter, Minds, and Instagram at EricsElectrons. That's with an S at the end of Eric and S at the end of Electron. And I'm probably gonna start a Facebook soon, but I'm also on YouTube at just Eric's Electrons on YouTube. I don't really post much there. I have a blog at I think it's ericselectrons.wordpress.com, I think,
Mhm.
something like that. I'll post it on one of my social media sites soon. I don't update there as often as I need to, but I will start starting at the end of the month because I'm in the process of moving right now. So yeah, Eric's Electrons across the board usually.
Well, that's awesome, man. Yeah, it's a pleasure to talk to you, and keep it up because we need more voices of reason to steer to navigate the tides and the squalls of this strange paradigm that we're living in currently. So I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
I appreciate you too and everything that you're doing because what you're doing is great work.
Oh, thanks, man. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. Well, you're the freaking physicist here. Okay, I can't even. I don't even. I'm quirky. I can't understand what a quark is. All right, man. I'll talk to you later. You take
All
care.
right. You
Goodbye.
too.
Whoa, guys, if you like the video, hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, hit the notification bell. Feel free to donate through paypal.me/BeacomOfLight. You can also become a patron for very, very little. If you like the video, again, hit that like button, leave a comment. I'm curious to know your thoughts. I love all of you guys. Live long and prosper.